And welcome back to Block TV, where it is time for Crypto Globe. That's a place we take a trip around the world to hear about the latest developments in the industry. Now, to guide us through our tour every week is Ethan Pierce, director of the Paris-based Crypto Assets Institute, speaking to us today from the lovely Provence. Ethan, I am pea green with jealousy. It's good to have you with us, though, today from the south of France.
Great. Always great to be here. Yeah.
Great to have you. Now, the bulk of the financial talk in mainstream markets at the beginning of this August is the escalation of the China-US trade wars. The details are known in the past 48 hours at the time of this taping, since the Chinese currency tumbled, or as President Donald Trump claimed was manipulated. Western markets have been reacting accordingly, with sharp tumbles themselves. Bitcoin, on the other hand, at the time of this taping, has surpassed the 12,000 mark, but is the cause clear? Important to note, gold price rose also as investors in the last 2 days, as investors are looking for safe havens throughout this trade war, which is only escalating. But hardcore Bitcoiners like Dovey Van, based in China, will disagree. In a tweet from the last 24 hours, Dovey essentially is arguing. She's saying Chinese buying up Bitcoin is very dubious, and is a very dubious narrative. And essentially, Dovey Van, one of the leading voices in the crypto sphere. It's interesting to know that Bitcoin mentioned in accordance with trade war results. Is it mostly Asian money? Do we think this is really correlated? Ethan, what's your take on this?
Well, I think definitely, if Trump wants to say that the yuan is being manipulated, he might be right, but is it China or is it him, given that, who's instigating this trade war? I would say, I think that on a macro level, it's pretty obvious that with this kind of a devaluation in China for the yuan, but also this kind of spike in Bitcoin price, that there has to be, at least some kind of correlation there, but whether or not it's actually linked to Chinese buyers specifically is pretty hard to gauge. A lot of the exchanges, a lot of the buying is offshore, so it's a little hard to gauge who is doing what specifically. I think what we'd probably, is the really capital flight out of China. Are lots of Chinese people buying more Bitcoin? It's very hard to measure, but I would say that what we're seeing is a softening in China of their stance towards crypto. So I think that plus the fact that as we see a rise in nationalism, as we see a rise in governments kind of picking economic fights with each other, are people looking for places to store value outside of sovereign currencies? That I think there's a lot of things there to talk about. So, but I think it's hard to say that it's directly that. If we want to talk about the perspective in terms of the softening in China on some of these things, they just had an internet court ruling in Hangzhou a couple weeks ago that basically said that Bitcoin would be considered as property and all the rights that entails. So I think that's a significant improvement or evolution in things. It doesn't consider it a currency, but it does say that you have legal rights in terms of ownership of digital assets.
I mean, it's essentially an asset. Yeah, an asset, which is more than many people in the West would would hope for in that respect, to get that type of clarification. Wondering with you though, because I mean, yes, the Chinese, I'm assuming, are devaluing their money. I'm theorizing with you in hopes that other countries will join this trade war and will devalue their money, by hence destabilizing the dollar. Do you see that happening? I mean, again, irrespective of who's to blame in the trade war, which is almost like the Middle East, but can this be a trend forward? Your take.
Yeah. Well, I think definitely. I think this is also. I think the softening. We often look at China and think that it is crypto unfriendly. The reality is, a lot of these governments, like we talked about last week with France, they're taking their time to figure crypto regulation out and how they want to position themselves. But that may look like they're anti or slow from the outside, but the reality is they're just looking to do it right. I would say when we start to see things like, if governments are going to be creating these economic issues between them, and then now we have things like Libra coming along where corporates are getting into the game, then I think we are going to be seeing more governments, more currencies, more action where there's, I don't know if manipulation is the right word, but where there is increased competition for who is going to be the currency or asset that is most highly valued or traded or used. And so I think China is definitely taking a big lead right now over the U.S. in an understanding of this. The CEO of Huawei has asked recently for the government to consider creating its own Libra type idea for fears of where that could go if the West's economic powers on the private side unite behind something like Libra. You have things like Walmart that just filed a patent for a very similar process. And so I think all of this is setting up to have, now we have sovereign currencies that are competing with each other. We will have non-sovereign currencies like Libra that are jumping into the fray. And then we have individual retail investors or just everyday people who are looking to where to put their assets. And all of that's going to start competing more and more. So I think this is just a sign of the fact that adoption is here in that digital assets are being considered a real thing and a real threat or a real opportunity, depending on who we're talking to. But it's pretty obvious that they're here and they're having an effect on the status quo.
No, entirely. And you know what? You made me think now. I'm completely theorizing, but I'm wondering what this type of trade war right now, with the escalation and clearly with more tariffs, I mean, this will have an effect on the American people as of September. What will it do for the regulation process of Libra? You know, one of the things that both David Marcus and people within the sphere constantly make as an argument is if we don't legislate cryptos, China's going to beat us to it. Do you think that'll have an effect finally?
I think there's a big risk in that. I think it's not necessarily just China that's the risk for the U.S. And I think this is a huge risk because the U.S. it pretty much seems to be falling behind in a lot of ways on a lot of this. I think China is a big risk because of the economic power that's involved, but also just look at all the other governments in the world that are not necessarily as competitive on a global level, but see this as a huge opportunity, like Singapore, like a lot of Central and Eastern Europe places, even if we look at Luxembourg or Liechtenstein or Malta, we look at Switzerland, and then obviously places like France and Germany that are getting very aggressive about creating blockchain and crypto regulation and opportunities. Some of the stuff we'll talk about in a minute for Southeast Asia. I think that this is, I think the big players are definitely a concern in terms of who's going to come out in that, and the U.S. seems to be dragging its feet in a lot of ways. But we also have to continue to pay attention to the fact that in a digital economy, in a global economy, powered by digital assets, the small, quote unquote, small nations can become very important because we simply need a place to domicile or be able to pass, from fiat to crypto and a lot of these things in order to create a lot of value in small places. But if you combine that with an economy as significant as China, yes, I think that David Marcus and others are very correct to worry about the U.S. economy if they don't get crypto right.
Regulated in a faster way. Let's move to the focus, because you the focus themes that you sent us this week began starting with Thailand, exactly what you spoke about right now, which is bringing cryptocurrency under AML rules. Are they going the compliance Libra coin route? What is going on there?
So there's two pieces to this. So Thailand is actually moving in a pretty positive direction. They just issued 4 new licenses for crypto activity companies. In Thailand, you need to have a license, a separate license if you're doing an exchange or a broker or a dealer, but you need to have different licenses if you are dealing with cryptocurrencies as currencies or digital tokens. But they are actually actively issuing these licenses and allowing the creation of digital economies in Thailand. However, specifically to this idea of the anti-money laundering discussion this week is that the anti-money laundering office of Thailand would like to see, has said that they're going to push to have cryptocurrencies included under the country's AML Act in order to basically prevent this becoming a safe haven or a tool for crime. So some of it sounds kind of the typical only criminals use digital assets or currencies, and it's a way to blah blah blah. So some of that seems a little bit negative, but the overall message I think right now coming out of Thailand is that they are creating legal ways for this to happen. But there's also, Thailand is a member of the Financial Action Task Force, and some of the recommendations of the FATF have been for exchanges to share information about the holder of assets that are being traded between exchanges, for any exchange or custody solution to have to be licensed and registered, to create a lot more transparency of these different things. And so I think Thailand is wanting to be aggressive about probably putting those in play in order to be able to kind of watch what's going on. But I don't think it's necessarily a completely negative message. I think the AML office, the tone of their message this week was a little bit crypto is bad, but I don't think that's the overall message in Thailand.
Okay, but staying in the same region, because we're Asia focused, as we said, with a feeling that we might be Asia focused in the next couple of weeks. South Korea declares partial regulation, exactly, partial regulation free zone for crypto companies. And that's basically, Busan, an area in South Korea, kind of a city that is trying to mimic, it sounds like Zug in Switzerland, which is, a place that they're looking to, but you're going to explain the pitfalls of it to me, to us. They're looking to create this place where innovation can thrive, but how is that not, a place where, it sounds a little bit like, once again, Libra moving to Switzerland, but they're creating a Switzerland of their own. What is going on in South Korea?
Exactly. So Busan is South Korea's second largest city. It's a major trade and finance region, and lots of innovation going on in Busan as well. Lots of industry, and so what they've done is that they have created a kind of a regulation-free zone. They've gotten rid of 11 specific regulations around finance and tourism and real estate, and
such as what? Specifically, what specific regulations they get rid of? Yeah.
Basically, just to allow the creation of sandboxes in different places regarding assets and ownership and transfer and securities. But this is the thing that's important to understand, that this safe zone is a blockchain question. It is not a crypto question. Okay. Meaning that the regulations apply to dealing with blockchain, but they don't apply to anything dealing with crypto assets. And so, but this is really interesting because you've got companies like Huawei that are launching a project. You've got one of the largest patent holders in Southeast Asia is based in, for blockchain and crypto is based in Busan. They're launching a real estate project. You've got basically a lot of enterprise blockchain innovation that they want to encourage pretty much in all these different sectors of real estate and finance, tourism, industry, but they wanted to create that not across Korea, but in a very specific economic zone to allow it to be kind of overseen. So even though it's they're removing certain regulation barriers to create sandboxes, they want to make sure that they can kind of keep oversight on that. So it's not a crypto question. It's merely about being able to apply digital ledger technologies to lots of existing industries, but in a way that can have oversight in specifically regulated industries.
Right. No,
like,
mostly tech. It sounds like
finance.
a mini Silicon Valley. Of course, always the question remains: once the sandboxes create a product, will that product be regulated? But important to note, as you said, that it's not the currency rather than the tech. Moving to Taiwan, digital banking licenses given to 3 banks.
Yeah, not to banks.
Sorry, to what? Yes.
They've issued 3 digital banking licenses in Thailand. So the first one was for Line, which is a Japanese messaging app, which is kind of the WhatsApp of a lot of places in Southeast Asia. It's in some countries like Thailand, it's the app.
Right.
And so in Taiwan as well, and other places, if you're not using WeChat, you're using Line. So that's interesting because if they have a digital banking license in Taiwan for Southeast Asia, then all of a sudden that allows for cross-border remittance and payments a la Libra or other things. Yep. So that's the first one. Second one is Rakuten, which is Japan's e-commerce giant. They have a bank, the International commercial bank that's based in Korea that's a partnership with the Korean bank. They were issued one of the licenses, so that's kind of a hybrid player. And the other one was Taiwan's telecom operator, Tsinghua, got one of the licenses. So another example, not necessarily a messaging app in the sense of Line, but if they're the ones selling a majority of the mobiles and the mobile plans to people in Taiwan, then the ability for them to push financial solutions through a digital banking license is that's significant. So that's pretty interesting. It follows on Hong Kong, which just issued another 8 digital banking licenses to organizations like Alibaba, but also to Standard Chartered. So I think we're seeing an increase in this across the region. Singapore will be issuing some this year, as well as Malaysia and Thailand, most likely. And that's going to create real opportunities for things like Revolut or N26 or Venmo or other solutions to create financial solutions, digital financial solutions, but not necessarily coming from banks.
No, entirely, but it does show that definitely in Asia they seem to be moving in a faster pace to enable mass adoption, irrespective of what that mass adoption is going to look like. Definitely something, as we said, the United States should heed to. Ethan, I don't want to really. I would like you to go over to the beautiful scenery behind you. Unbelievable, I know. Ethan Pierce from Provence today with a closer look at Asia regulations as we are in the midst of the trade war between the U.S. and China. Thank you for joining us. Your BLOCKTV will be right back.
Thanks, everyone.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter.